Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment, then you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Healing Moment session. We trust that you had a good day, and we hope that as we go through our program with you, that you will have a better evening. I don't know what your day must have been or what your week has been like, but we invite you to join us here on Zoom, as well as those who are joining us on YouTube and wherever you are joining us from. We are so thankful that our viewing audience, that you stay with us week by week. And we hope that you invite someone to join, learn more about what God has to share with you through us. And we know that you will be blessed. So we are in a new month. We're in the month of April. And that may mean different things for different people, for all of us. But for us here on Healing Moments, our focus is on peer pressure. Now, you know, normally peer pressure is something that is associated with teens. So therefore, adolescents will be our focus, but we know that peer pressure is also seen and felt throughout our life, whether we are children, whether we are adults, whether we are older adults. But before we get into our session, let's bow our heads for prayer. Kind Father who art in heaven, we thank you so much for being with us throughout the day. And now, even as we spend a few moments with you and with each other, we thank you for the way in which you have been able to bring us from wherever we are through technology. We pray especially for a touch on all the technical devices that are being used. We pray for our voices, but most of all, Lord, we pray for our listening audience and those who will listen in time to come. Be with us, and may we indeed learn more about ourselves and more about you as we go through this month. For Christ's sake, amen. So as I said before, that our focus for the month of April is on peer pressure. And I thought that I would start with a little story. I hope that you find it interesting, and I hope that it reflects on what we consider peer pressure to be. Now, normally at the beginning of any month, when we are starting a new topic, I like to give a definition. Today is a little different. You won't get a full definition, but you'll have, and I'm sure you have an idea of what peer pressure is all about. So I want you to imagine 3 young people are in town. For those of us from Barbados, they're in Bridgetown, they're in Swan Street, or they're in Sheraton. They're shopping. And one says to the next, let's call the first one Suki. Suki says to Leah, Leah, now, quick, while the clerk is not looking. Leah's heart is pounding as she reaches across to the unattended makeup display, and she takes up 2 tubes of lip gloss and she slides them in her purse. No one saw but she and her friends. They continue browsing the store as if they are going to buy something. And then they decide to leave. I know they want to look cool and casual, looking bored and detached as they follow each other out the door. Now, Leah, the one who took the lip gloss, Leah and Suki met Jill outside. And when Leah got outside, Leah told Jill and Suki, my heart was pounding so much. I thought I was going to jump out of my chest. Relax, they say to her. Everybody does it sometimes. And we didn't make you do it. You did it on your own. Suki contemplates and Leah contemplates as well. They don't say anything. And she knew full well that yes, while she did it on her own, she just had a big dose of peer pressure. Now that story may sound familiar. It may never have been you, or it may be a different situation, supermarket, something else. Ever so often, and especially through our teenage years, we find ourselves confronted by the pressure to fit in, the pressure to do what your friends are doing, the pressure to conform. And while, yes, we make the choice because we choose to do it, the choice is based on what our friends are doing or what we think they are doing, or what we think they would want us to do, what would happen, what we think they would do, and what we want to do in order to feel cool. That's a word that is often associated with peer pressure. Now, I talk about peer pressure. Now, we all know what pressure is, but who are your peers, young people? When you were a child, I'm sure that many of the persons that you associated with were the friends of your parents, who also had your parents' friends who had children. So you grew up with your parents and their children and their friends and their children, and everybody got along. As you get older, you decided who your friends were and the groups that you would hang around with and you would spend time with. Your friends, your peers, are the people that are usually your age. They are those who are close to you. They share similar experiences with you, similar interests. You and your friends make all kinds of decisions throughout the day, every day, day in, day out, and you influence each other's choices and behavior. The more you remember those terms, especially the influence of choices and behaviors. It is often positive. As human nature is, we listen to and we learn from people our age. There's also another side, a negative side to the choices that we make and the behaviors that we display. And as we become more independent, our peers play more of a vital role in our life. You know, as a child coming up, everything is mommy or daddy or auntie or granny or somebody. But when you get to school and as you get especially into adolescence, you are so concerned about what your friends think. You're so concerned about how you look in their eyes. And your family, they kind of take a back seat. You spend more time with your peers because you're at school with them than your parents or your siblings. And you develop close relationships with them. Now, your peers are also those who are in your class. They may not be close to you, like your friends, but they're in the same year level as you are. Maybe they're in the same class or they go to church with you, the same sports team, they live in the same area. These all influence us by the way we dress, and the way we act, the things we're involved in, the things we do not become involved in, and the attitudes that we show. And it is natural for people to want to identify and compare themselves with their peers. Remember, no man, woman, teen boy, or teen girl is an island. We are influenced by our peers because we want to fit in. We want to be like those that we admire. And sometimes the admiration can be all materialistic. We like the way how a person dresses, or we like something that they do. We like a skill that they have. And that is not always bad. So this month, as we look at peer pressure, as we focus on you teens, you're on holiday because you have at least 2 weeks to rest, revitalize, and more important, gain something from these sessions that we're having. So what's ahead for the month? We're going to be looking at negative and positive peer pressure. We're going to be looking at what it looks like when the pressure is on and what we do when we're in a pressurized situation. Stay with us. Stay tuned to Healing Moments because there is something that is there for you. I am Sherry Sobers, and we are so glad that you are here with us. Stay tuned as Dr. Corinthia Dupree shares with us the medical side of peer pressure.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
I also have a story. You wouldn't believe it. When I was in primary school, I was very, very smart. You probably, if you know me now, you probably don't think so. But I was very, very smart. And so one day, our teacher gave us as homework to learn a poem. And that poem was very long. It was called Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. And if you've ever seen that poem, you know that it's a very long poem. It has a lot of verses. I'm not sure how many days she gave us to learn it, but I know that I could learn it. So I spent some time learning it, and I knew it, at least the number of verses that she had assigned. And when the day came for us to repeat it, well, everybody had to repeat it in turn. So the other students in the class got a chance to repeat it. And of course, most of them, or all of them, couldn't remember all of the verses that we were given, but I knew all of the verses. So what do you think I did? Do you think I stood up and repeated all 10 verses that I had to learn? Um, and the teacher had said if we couldn't say it, we couldn't go out for break. So you know what I did? After about 3 verses, I pretended that I couldn't remember the rest. And so we all stayed inside. We didn't go for recess because what was the point of going outside for recess by myself as being the only one in the class who was outside? And what was the point of being smarter than everybody else and being hated probably by everybody else? So that was my story in primary school. In secondary school, it was the 1970s, and miniskirts were in style. And unlike Barbados, the girls don't wear their skirts below their knees. And so even though we were told to wear it on our knees, all of the girls were wearing short skirts. So of course, I tucked in my waistband multiple times so that I could be walking around in shorter skirts, even though I couldn't leave home like that. So why am I saying all this to say? It seems that our brains are wired to conform, as strange as that may seem. And those of us who know our Bibles, we know Romans 12:2, that says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And we can repeat that and we can tell other people not to be conformed. But how easy is it not to conform? So, as I was saying, it seems that our brains are wired to conform socially. And we make use of that, of course, because we have clubs where people of like interests come together and we make altar calls. And when we make altar calls, the pastor puts his hand up and asks for people to put their hand up, and hands go up. And I'm sure not all the hands that go up because people are making decisions, but the hands go up because other people's hands are going up. And people sometimes walk forward because their peers have just walked forward. So sometimes peer pressure can be a force for stupidness, can be a force for evil. It can also be used for good. Now, in teenagers, the brain is still developing. That part of the brain that includes the amygdala that we talked about sometime last year, but if you weren't here, it is part of the limbic system. And the limbic system is that part of the brain that deals with reward. I remember saying that the limbic system doesn't do calculations. It doesn't say, okay, you know what, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, I shouldn't do this. It's that almost automatic, that part that deals with emotions like fear and excitement. And that part of the brain also deals with reward and fear of punishment. And so, in order to avoid what we may term punishment or what we may see as punishment, like for me, the punishment for me was not being allowed to go outside. The punishment for me was being disliked by my peers because I was so much smarter than them. And so my brain was trying to avoid that. So the amygdala in teenagers, in adolescents, is the fastest growing part of the brain, and the cortex, that part, is not yet fully developed. It's still developing, but the amygdala has developed. And the brain, frontal cortex, is what we make decisions with. What we, it's the higher functioning parts of the brain that makes executive decisions and plans and thinks things through. And that part is not as well developed. And so that's why it's so much easier for adolescents to conform or to give in to peer pressure, because the brain is trying to avoid what it sees as punishment. Sometimes that punishment is just loneliness. Nobody likes to be lonely. As a matter of fact, um, the evidence is there that lonely people, even especially older people, the lonelier they are, the more likely they are to develop cognitive decline and dementia. It's also shown that stroke patients who are lonely are less likely to recover than stroke patients who are in in company, in a healthy social setting, who are being taken care of by people they love. Um, they are more likely to recover. There have also been other experiments where a group of people were asked to rate a number of faces. So let's say they were given 20 women's faces and asked which was the most attractive, and they were supposed to rank them. And then after they ranked them, then they were shown um, the ranking that was put together by a group of their peers. May be fake, it may be true, but they were shown that ranking. Then they were taken into other activities, and they were shown those same pictures again. And when they ranked them the second time around, they were more likely to match with those that they thought their peers had done, with how they thought their peers had done. So, and there are multiple other experiments that show that our brains are wired to conform socially, to do what other people are doing. And as we get older, of course, and as we learn to think more for ourselves, and as we develop a better functioning cortex, then we are able to make those decisions that allow us to stand out. And as one article I was reading recently said, nobody ever gained fame or fortune by following the crowd. It is often the person who stands out that becomes well known. So the NFL player, whose name I cannot recall now, who took a knee when the anthem was being played, is the one that the news was about. It's it's Nelson Mandela who didn't go along with what the government of South Africa um, wanted Black people to do, who stands out in history. So, notwithstanding that our brains are wired to conform, and that there are certain areas of our brain that are more developed um, when we are conformists, we can unlearn to conform to what other people do and learn to stand out. Remember, we can always rewire our brains by um, performing new activities. So if we're used to going along with the crowd, if we're used to conforming and we practice non-conformity, then we're making new pathways in our brains. And soon we will be more comfortable, um, not, we will be more comfortable standing out than conforming. So I've gone from where I was afraid to say the poem because I didn't want to appear too smart and be disliked by my peers, to where I don't mind standing alone to sing Standing on the Promises, even if everybody else is sitting, because it is my of my understanding that I cannot sing a song about standing while I'm sitting. So I have now become, the opposite of a nonconformist. I do not mind going in the opposite direction. And I'm not telling you that is what you should do, but I'm saying that um, standing out, there's nothing wrong with standing out if you're standing for principle, if you really believe in what you're doing, if you really believe, for example, if you want to stand on God's side, there is nothing wrong with doing it, even if everybody is going in the other direction. So that's what I have for you this evening. I would welcome you asking any questions, and I hope you come back next week.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doc. I am reminded of a quote. You know I like my quotes, so I'll share two with you this evening. The first one speaks directly to your story and your thoughts, Doc. It says, and it's by Wycliffe Jean, and he says, at the end of the day, just know that God made you so you can be your own individual. Don't let people give you that peer pressure. You know, it is easier said for some, it is easier than others. And we know that you would have heard from what I said, you would have heard from what Dr. Dupree said about the amygdala and the front part of your brain and the decision making and stuff like that. And at this time, we have a few minutes. If you wish to share any questions, if you want to ask any questions, or if you want to share any stories with us that may be similar to the one I shared or the one Dr. Dupree shared, or if you have your own story, we will, you are free to do so at this time. And if you are still thinking and you want to reserve those questions till next week or the next few weeks, you're also free to do that. But at this time, we're into our question or statement or comments time of healing moments. And I see that. Good evening. This is.
I currently, Rochelle.
Hi, Rochelle. Good evening, Rochelle. Sure, go ahead, share with us.
How are you, Sister Sobers? Good?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. I could relate to Sister Dupuy. When I was in secondary school, I went in with the normal length uniform like everybody was at that time. And when we got to understand what was going on as far as the trends with wearing the uniform, because I had a pleated uniform, my uniform wasn't straight, and it was easy to take up the uniform, you know, a couple of inches and put on your belt. And that is exactly what everybody basically did. Even the goody two shoes. And I was in the goody two shoes category.
Okay.
But I wanted to be like everybody else. Nobody don't want to stand out like a sore thumb, you know. But that, I guess, that was the way, or that is the way that most people are socialized. You get, this is how society brings us up from in primary or nursery school, and everyone just conforms. But as Christians, we aren't called to conform. We are called to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So when she was relaying the story, I was saying to myself, that sounded just like me, but that was as far as it went. Otherwise, I was doing everything according to the
Right.
Thank you so much for
So,
sharing, Rochelle. I'm sure that you got that off your chest and it felt good to be able to,
yes.
Dr. Dupree, you're not alone.
Right. I'm not alone. So we can see that, you know, when we take apart the text, we can see that it is possible to rewire, to transform our minds, to rewire, because it says, do not be conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it's talking about the brain. The mind is where we make our decisions. So it's talking about if we keep making right decisions, then our minds are going to be transformed. In other words, we're going to be making new neural pathways, so that instead of conformity, instead of amygdala attitudes, we're going to be frontal cortex, because we're going to be thinking and making the right decisions.
Very good
The
point.
Bible has
No.
it exactly as it should be, because it's the Bible, yeah.
But you know what I'm reminded of, Doc? I'm reminded of the fact that what you said earlier about the development of the brain in teens, the inexperienced or the immature or underdeveloped, that may not be the right word or term, but the fact that it is still developing. So therefore, the decision-making aspect, we are not always, for teens, and I'm sure all of us can relate to something when we did something as a teen just because our friends did it. Either it was something we wore, it was an attitude or a behavior that we had, something we said to our parents, something, you know, it was something. And science shows that the reason why that happened is because we are basically still developing. I see that there is a, yes, Rochelle. Rochelle says in the chat, she says, I no longer want to be like everyone else. I love standing out. And it is something that as we get older, as we recognize the strength that we have in being one with God, for those of us who are walking that path, we understand that with God, one is a majority. So as we wrap up, we want to thank you so much for joining us. If we have no more questions or comments, you can keep them until next week. We have a whole month to discuss peer pressure. And I wish to leave with you a quote which says, peer pressure is something everyone will face in school. And this obviously relates to teens. You have to really go by what you think is the right thing to do. Turn to the friends you trust the most when you are put in a compromising situation. If your friends are making the wrong decision, then turn to your parents. And I thought to share this because as we go into peer pressure more, we would realize that sometimes the best person to turn to some person that we trust. And when the friends are doing foolishness, as we would say, turn to your parents. They love you. This is me speaking to you, teens, adolescents, young adults. They want the best for you. Some of them have walked where you are walking now. They don't necessarily want you to make the same mistakes that they made. You don't have to learn by your own experience. You can learn by someone else's experience. So as we talk about peer pressure, as you think about for the older ones, as you think about your life as a teen, for the teens, you think about your experiences, maybe at school, maybe at church, maybe in your community. I pray that you contemplate. Join us next week as we continue to discuss this topic some more, and do continue to have a healing moment and bring a friend. Have a good evening, everyone.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.